To the Take the North podcast. I'm David Hoff on the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune covering the Bears, and we are getting ever closer to April 25th when the Bears will make the first selection in the 2024 NFL Draft. Dan, and as we get closer to that night, it is great actually from our perspective. I think we both can agree that the lack of speculation over who they're going to take at number one has been enjoyable because of what is inevitable, and most of the debate being on what they do with number 9. And you can have fun with that because there's not as much pressure. The pressure's off when you take Caleb Williams, which I think has been the focus, understandably, of most of the pre-draft talk concerning the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, the pressure's off once you draft your future franchise quarterback, your QB1 there. And it's also off because, as we've talked about ad nauseum, there are just so many good options at number 9 that there doesn't feel like there's a significantly wrong answer with what they're going to do at 9. And so it feels like a very light mood right now in Chicago after what was a few months of less than light moods around here. This feels like a quiet pocket, and now I'm going to knock on whatever is close to me that's wooden and do that whole thing. But yeah, next week the draft arrives, and we'll be able to flip the page into a new chapter with 2 top 10 picks that presumably set the Bears up to open that window that we've talked about forever.
I want to talk to you about what quarterbacks come after Caleb Williams. I want to talk to you about the thought process again at number 9 as we continue to debate that. I want to talk to you about your story in the Sunday Chicago Tribune about the stadium project and how examples in Indianapolis, Minneapolis, and Arlington, Texas might influence and impact what the Bears do. But I want to start first with this Caleb Williams idea because we need to know certain things. Number 1, we know he will be at the draft in Detroit. Yeah. Number 2, do you know what he will be wearing?
I do not. That's a good question, though. If he is as confident in the end result of this as we all are, you would think that maybe he would come with something, a sharp navy and
you saw the tweet, tie. Right? You saw the tweet. He was threatening something big and bold and ready for, maybe we won't be ready for this. And only anecdotal social media evidence, and I dare I even advance that, but does he have a girlfriend who is a designer, a fashion designer?
I don't know this. I haven't gotten to this level of the research project yet. Thankfully, we'll have a couple months after he's drafted to get deep down into the background of all his family members and significant others. Would this qualify as big and bold for you? You have a nice navy blazer, sharp orange tie, some football pants, and a Staley head.
The Staley head would be a bit much. The Staley head might be a bit much.
Big and bold, though, right? Yeah. Like that's what we're going for.
I would probably choose for understated and let other things speak for him. But look, he's 22. He's 22 years old. He's going to have some fun with it, and I think that we have to allow him to do that.
I'll tell you this. Earlier today, I had to fill out the remaining information on my credential request for the red carpet in Detroit. I'm already locked in for the draft coverage, but now I got to go to the red carpet before it starts, just in case, get a nugget, get a little bit of color, get maybe a quote somewhere along there. And it's the first time I'll ever have been on the red carpet of the NFL draft. The only time that I was in person at the NFL draft was when it was here in Chicago the second year in 2016. And if you remember, the Bears traded up, drafted Leonard Floyd, and Leonard Floyd was not at the draft. And
I remember
it was
that.
A pretty fruitless experience to be down there in downtown Chicago and try to cover the draft when there was really nobody in the premises there to talk to that could advance the story, and all the action was really at Haugh Hall.
I remember that well, and yeah, there will be a lot of consternation on the red carpet, but I think the things that we need to focus on are that the things that about Caleb Williams people continue to say that are positive, that have nothing to do with fashion or his personality necessarily, but it have to do with him as a quarterback, which is becoming increasingly clear the closer we get to the draft, the more the things that we said long ago before this process even began might come true. He is in the eyes of many scouts, a consensus is building that there is a wide gap between Caleb Williams and everybody else. Is that overstating it in your mind, Dan?
No, it's not. And that seems to be the consensus here a week out. And now there is a train of thought that, look, like everybody went sort of on a scavenger hunt to dig up dirt on Caleb Williams between the end of his regular season at USC and this point now. And ultimately there was no dirt to dig up. And so we've landed at the same conclusion. My version of that story would be that there were legitimate things within the scouting report of Caleb Williams that needed to be vetted. To the Bears' credit, they did a good job vetting it to get themselves in a spot where they feel comfortable next week pulling the trigger on that, understanding that the breathtaking gifts that this kid brings as a quarterback are worth rolling the dice on, and then acknowledging some of the things that you may have to work with him on to make sure that it's as smooth of a transition as humanly possible. And so I think when we get to the end of this process here around the league, there's a sentiment that look like the gifts are superseding any worries or concerns of personality traits or maturity concerns or things of that nature. And now there's just a heavy focus on why this pick makes absolute sense for a franchise like the Bears and the GM like Ryan Poles.
So some of the things that we have seen come out are in support of that idea, and you saw a couple things from Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, some other things from a list on Yahoo that just underscore, frankly, how special Caleb Williams is expected to be. Now, sure, everyone can bust out. Every draft pick is a projection, but I think that as we continue to look at this, more people are believing and expressing just how that's unlikely to be the case.
Yeah, well, Jeremy Fowler took a little survey, little random poll of people around the league. I think it was 11 executives, coaches, and scouts. Asked them to weigh in on the draft eligible quarterbacks for this year and put them into tiers, and then kind of sorted them through that way to come up with thumbnails on each of these quarterbacks. And Caleb Williams was the undisputed number one quarterback of the entire class. He was the only prospect this year to receive a tier 1 grade on every single ballot that Jeremy took. I'll read you a couple things from this report on ESPN.com because it'll just give people in Chicago a better understanding of that kind of unfiltered feeling that the league has on the guy that's about to become your quarterback, Chicago. And so an NFL coordinator told Jeremy Fowler he's a star. From a talent standpoint, he's in his own class. His rare gifts make him an exception to the rest of this year's group because of his high-level instincts, foot quickness, and accuracy. He does not have one glaring weakness on which scouts harp. He makes holy bleep throws on a regular basis, said another scout. So you've got this consensus building that there's something there. There was some thoughts that maybe he didn't have the best spring in terms of his performance at the pro day, coupled with the way he interviewed at the combine, but some others speculated that when you know where you're going to be playing, there's not a whole lot of incentive to put a whole lot into impressing other teams that aren't going to draft you. The last one here is most say the perception that Williams insists on making plays on the run instead of within the confines of a system is overblown. Of the 87 players in FBS history to record 10,000 yards of total offense and 100 touchdowns responsible for, Williams has the fewest turnovers at 19. This is an NFL offensive coach. Go back to Oklahoma and early USC with Jordan Addison, and he played on time. He has that gear and will be willing to do that. I believe his supporting cast was not as good in 2023, so he had to make some things happen. Everyone who spends time with him says he's a really good kid. The noise on the outside, I don't think that's him. So there's your kind of thumbnail of Caleb Williams, which marries up with a lot of things that we've been reporting on, discussing, and sorting through here in the lead up to what is going to be a much anticipated wedding that will come next week.
Yeah, and I hope that people remember that when the inevitable post-draft focus ends up being on things that are superfluous or irrelevant, or like I said, I was kind of being facetious about the wardrobe, but there will be people who focus on that and how he handles the interviews. And if he says something that is, oh, gotcha, I told you about Caleb, he's not that guy that you said that he was. And I think that will linger for a while, and it might last for a while, and then he'll get on the field and you'll say, wow, that stuff doesn't matter.
But that stuff will last even when he gets on the field as well. And
yeah,
you and I have talked about it. That's going to be monthly, if not weekly, in the Caleb Williams experience. And so everybody that's around it better be prepared for that, because this is a world where, the viral aggregation machine takes over, and everything you do and say will be subject to being twisted first and then analyzed second. And so you just got to be prepared for that. And so that's not going to go away. There's going to be some things that Caleb Williams says when he meets with the media at rookie camp. There's going to be something he does when he reports to training camp. Somewhere along the line, there are going to be headlines made that you and I will sit on this podcast and go, why was that a headline? But the rest of the world will be discussing it for an entire week. And so that's just going to come along with this. But to your point, the entertainment factor and the enjoyment factor that Chicago Bears are anticipating of putting him on their football field and having him run their offense is high. And there's a belief that there are gifts here that no quarterback that's ever walked through the doors at 1920 Football Drive in Lake Forest has ever had. And so now we'll kind of sit back and chronicle every step of the way.
And I do think that it will be interesting to see exactly how he interacts with every constituency he encounters, and I just don't know. Like, you're going to be in Detroit. Are you going to be able to deal with him there? Or then is he going to be at Haugh Hall? And I think I'm not quite sure how quickly they're going to bring him into the fold. But I don't think you've ever been through anything like this before. And I'm curious how the Bears, as we continue to talk about, are they equipped for this, are going to handle all this.
This is worth laying out for people just so we know what the tradition has been and the routine has been, and we can compare it to what happens at the end of next week. Usually the guy who gets picked, if he's in attendance at the actual draft, he will speak to reporters at the site of the draft. He will get on either a Zoom or a conference call with media at Haugh Hall on the night of the draft and talk to them for 5 minutes or so. The following day, he'll make his way to Lake Forest. He'll fly into Chicago, get a nice little ride, which will be well documented by ChicagoBears.com with videos at every step of the way, from the second he steps off the plane to the minute he walks past the Hallis statue out front. And then usually there's the obligatory press conference there, and then a bunch of one-on-one sessions or 5-on-1 sessions as they become over the years, where that top draft pick will go do sit downs with television stations. Then he'll meet with a group of print reporters, 4 and 5 at a time, for a pretty long afternoon. I don't know. We've talked about how Caleb Williams does things differently. He may not be agreeable to all of this on his first day as a Chicago Bear. He may try to talk his new organization into setting up a program that's a little different for him. The Bears will also have another top 10 pick that they're going to be managing on the same day. So that brings a juggle into the equation as well. But, at least worth putting that out there, a little peek behind the curtain for our audience, so that when we get to next Friday, we have a feel for what's the norm and then what is actually done.
And specifically, to get back to the tweet I was referring to on X or Twitter, if you still call it that, at Caleb CSW on April 13th, which is over the weekend, tweeted this: "Wait till y'all see draft day suit in my lady's dress. One of ones." So that led people to believe that Caleb Williams might not necessarily be dressed for success on draft night, but he might be wearing a dress. So prepare yourselves accordingly, Bears fans.
Take the North is prepared to be there, boots on the ground on that red carpet, to see what it is. I think that
or heels on the ground.
That same draft that I was talking about downtown Chicago, where Leonard Floyd wasn't there, I believe Ezekiel Elliott rolled in like a crop top, right?
Crop top, showing his abs.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's going to be some style twists and turns in this whole story. Look, this is new. This is going to be different. And ultimately, the hope is that it's different in the most glorious way possible on Thursdays and Mondays and Sundays in the fall, when the Bears are stacking victories for a decade.
So let's continue with that. That's the focus that needs to be in Chicago. But obviously, after Caleb Williams, what happens with the quarterbacks next in the draft will affect who's available at number 9. There are scenarios that and mock drafts that project Jaden Daniels goes next, then maybe J.J. McCarthy goes next, and Drake May. But most mock drafts have all 4 quarterbacks going in maybe the top 6 picks. Potentially 2 or 3 wide receivers, Dan. Potentially Joe Alt, the offensive tackle. And I wonder, as we talk today, a day after Chop Robinson was the latest edge rusher to visit Haugh Hall, the last of maybe the first-round worthy edge rushers, is it getting closer to the reality, or is Ryan Poles wanting people to believe that the Bears could end up with the number 1 offensive player in the draft, if you consider that to be Caleb Williams, and the number 1 defensive player in the draft, whoever the edge rusher is that they identify as being the best one available based on all of their visits that they did with every edge rusher?
Well, remember, I'm not hell-bent on just saying edge rusher. I'm hell-bent on saying pass rusher. It could be one of the three guys off the edge, whether it be Latu or Dallas Turner or Jared Verse, but they could also go finally lock down that three-tech position with Byron Murphy, who I think has a lot of potential fit for Matt Eberflus's defense and the vision that he and Ryan Poles have for building their defense in that part of the front four. So this possibility is there. And like, this is the gift that this entire city has been waiting for forever. They've waited for a draft where you not only get your first choice of quarterbacks, but you get your first choice of quarterbacks in a year where the guy coming out is one that scouts have been talking about for 3 years and haven't been able to take their eyes off him for 3 years. And then you have another top 10 pick because you got that first number 1 pick from another team. And now you can use your own pick in a draft where your major needs marry up with positions in this draft at the top of the draft that are stocked and deep, and give you an opportunity to add an immediate blue player who can be an impact starter before September is over. And so, look, like, this is golden, David. Like, this is the territory where, like, if the Bears mess this up, and you and I are sitting on this podcast in 4 years going, what happened with the 2024 draft class? Then you may as well just think about following another team, because then that means that the organization is incapable of getting things right, because this is going to be a hard one to screw up. And to the Bears' credit, they seem ready to capitalize.
So I'm leaning towards still projecting and also recommending that the Bears stay at 9, hold on to the pick, and draft Rome Odunze if he is there.
I'm cool with that.
I also wonder if how that fits into the conversation at Haugh, if they're having these projections, and they are, with what's going on at the wide receiver position in the league, and how the NFL economics, as we start to look at the shifts from, wide receivers are getting paid like edge rushers now. You look at Devontae Smith in Philadelphia. Just signed a $75 million, or agreed to reportedly a $75 million contract for 3 years. Justin Jefferson has yet to report to the Vikings' voluntary offseason workout program because he wants to be the highest paid wide receiver probably in history. We see Stephon Diggs on the move and what his cap hit is. We see Keenan Allen with a $23 million cap hit. Dan, I wonder if the Bears, not even wonder, I've got to think that the Bears look at drafting a wide receiver at that spot as being economically feasible to grow with Caleb Williams. Regardless, the football issues are great and defensible, but I also think the trends in the way that wide receivers are getting paid are going to factor into that decision-making, maybe more than we realize.
There's a couple things on this, and maybe Studs can do a little bit of easy research while we talk through this, but I believe that Devontae Smith was the player that the Eagles jumped, was it the Giants for in 2021, that stole that wide receiver off the board, that then allowed the Bears to trade up to the next slot because the team that was sitting there, I think it was the Giants, weren't going to be able to get Devontae Smith. And so they said, we're moving out of this spot. And the Bears came flying up and drafted Justin Fields. And so Devontae Smith is partially part of the domino effect that allowed the Bears to have the Justin Fields 3-season era that we just closed the books on. I think you're right in shining a light on just how much more of a premium position the wide receiver position has become versus 15 years ago, versus 20 years ago, where now that's almost as valuable as a top tier edge rusher. It's almost as valuable as anything else on your roster at this point, is to get a guy in a passing league that can get you 6 catches, 100 yards, and touchdown every week. Like, that's the trend of where we're going in the top 10 of these receiver drafts. And so now this draft not only has the 3 that we've been talking about for 3 months, but it's considered a really, really deep class where you can get into middle to late day 2, rounds 2 and 3, and still have some potential big time playmakers on the board there. And so that's something that is going to guide the thinking of every team in the league, not just the decision makers at Haugh. And at that point, you just have to have a long, hard discussion. And look, like, the Bears have gone through these mocks, and they've done these hypotheticals, and they've done all these different scenarios for a while. They're going to be prepared for whatever. And they've certainly had these discussions already to make these things happen.
Yeah, and I think because of how much they just have invested at the position already, they know that they're going to have to likely make a decision on Keenan Allen at some point, but I just don't know if they have to make a decision before they have to make a decision.
They don't.
And so you wait it out, and but I do think this, Dan. I wonder if you agree or not. I do think part of their um, decision making process will be affected by whether or not they have a young wide receiver that they drafted at ninth overall, or somebody that they added in the fourth round, or whatever the case may be, who might not be as ready, might not be as dynamic, and might not be the kind of guy they envision growing with Caleb Williams. Whereas at number 9, you kind of make that decision already, and that Keenan Allen's future might not be affected in 2024, but beyond that, could be affected by who they draft at number 9.
Yeah, and it's a good topic, and it's just worth understanding that there's no rush to make any decision on Keenan Allen's future here. Ryan Poles has hinted at it several times and saying that there's a certain order that he likes to do business with the guys he has in his building, and so I think there's a sentiment that DJ Moore would be up for an extension before Keenan Allen would be up for an extension, if that makes sense. And in order to lock up the guy that's already here, and now their contracts aren't similar, aren't identical, and you're playing a little bit of that chess game. But you also do have the luxury of seeing what happens in the draft, and you do have the luxury of kind of getting that guy, if it is a receiver, in your building, and having some time with him to forecast, okay, how quickly is this guy going to be ready to emerge as that every week difference maker? And then you can make your business decisions from there. A lot to figure out.
So Studs did the research. The Eagles indeed traded with the Cowboys for the number 10 pick. They moved up from 12 to 10 to get Devontae Smith. The Cowboys then, oh boy, they had to settle at 12th for Micah Parsons.
And while all that leapfrog game was happening in the NFC East, the Giants said at 11, hey, Ryan Pace, you want this pick? He said, yeah, absolutely. We're going to try to save our jobs here with Justin Fields. They came flying up to number 11, and so it went Devontae Smith, Justin Fields, Micah Parsons.
So the Bears began their voluntary offseason workout regimen on April 15th, on Monday, tax day. They reported to work. They probably didn't worry about that stuff the way we did, but it fascinates me still, and I know this is going to be like I'm a broken record this offseason. It still kind of amuses me. I'm not sure what the right verb is, Dan, but right now, Tyson Bagent is the Bears starting quarterback. So when they call the starting offense into the room to watch tape or whatever they're doing, or their organized team activities or their offseason regimen, Tyson Bagent is QB1. I don't know how I feel about that, but I have to get on board because I don't think the Bears are going to add a veteran unless somebody comes available during camp. But I don't think they're going to go into a camp with a veteran. It's going to be Caleb Williams, Tyson Bagent, and Brett Rippon.
Well, listen, we're a month plus away from the team being allowed to go out on the field and start doing actual practicing. So the QB1 designation doesn't mean anything at this point. And so by the time that the Bears have an actual practice, the guy who is going to be QB1 is a guy we've been talking about for months, Caleb Williams. He's going to slide Tyson aside and say, nice to meet you. I'm Caleb. Can you carry my backpack and my and my notepad to the next
dress?
You're really stuck on this, aren't you?
I mean, the dress. He said he's going to wear a dress. A Bears quarterback in a dress. That sounds very Rodman-esque. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see if this happens. I'm very intrigued.
But so there's that part of it. And this is one of those years where the start of the offseason program didn't really have much ripple effect to it because there's not any major contractual gripes going on. There's not any quarterback drama going on at the present moment. And so the Bears are just going to go and lift weights and meet together as a team and start to get swole for the start of OTAs next month.
Let's bring the starting offense into the room. Let's get it started. Okay, who's the quarter? Oh, Tyson. It matters. He can tell his kids that for like 4 weeks of glory, he was this QB1.
He already did that last year.
I know that's true.
4 weeks as QB1.
That's true.
He's done this and he handled himself quite well.
2-2. I know. I remember.
Again, like I'm disappointed that we haven't had more time this offseason to really dive deeper in on the Tyson Bagent story, because that's one that we really need to spend some time on before it's all said and done.
We kind of talked over, but there's no doubt. And I just want to make sure, because some teams have screwed this up, and certainly the Bears have screwed this up before. The minute Caleb Williams is drafted and the card is in, he's a starting quarterback, right? They're giving, Caleb, here's your locker, here's your jersey, here are the keys to the organization. Go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think there's any any sort of gray area here at all that they're
Okay.
going to say, oh, wait, if there was, it would be some long in the tooth established veteran coming here to kind of to build the bridge. But I don't think they need a bridge in this case. And it's Caleb Williams' show from the minute that he hugs Roger Goodell next week. One other thing on Caleb Williams here, while we've got a second in the conversation, Charles Robinson at Yahoo is overseeing their annual all juice team. Now that all juice team started with the late Perez Taylor putting forth a list of guys every year that met me, I'm a juice guy, that met the qualifications for bringing something a little extra. It wasn't always just, top 10 picks. It wasn't always just early day 2 guys and above. It was a whole list of guys in the draft where it was like, these are guys that are going to be something in the league because I like them. Well, since Charles Robinson has taken it over for his late friend, he had the latest addition for the 2024 all juice team from the draft class. And the quarterback of that team is none other than Caleb Williams. And it's not just solely based on his ability to play. It's based on the entire package that he brings to the table. And so on a podcast on Yahoo Sports, Charles Robinson explained some of the conversations he had with people around the league that helped them get that conclusion rubber stamped and put an exclamation point behind it. Here's some of what Charles Robinson had to say on that topic.
The stuff that we're, whatever problems people have with them right now, they're nitpicking a lot of different things. And an evaluator said to me, like, we've literally been staring at this kid since his true freshman season at Oklahoma. He's like there's nobody you stare at, particularly at the quarterback position, who plays it at a super high level, by the way, as a true freshman. And after 3 years, you just he's like, he almost said sick. He stopped himself, or he said, you just get sick at looking at guys. But that was sort of the insinuation. And so I will say the one thing I really enjoyed, when you're looking for comps for Caleb, and you hear a lot of the Rodgers comps now. And one guy said to me, though, he was like, I think he's sort of a hybrid between Favre and Rodgers. He's like, because he's got a lot of the athletic traits of Rodgers and the arm and these different things. He said, but the one thing that he has with Favre, he doesn't like to let a play die. Like he will do, and he said that's a good thing. Sometimes a bad thing. He's like, just like with Favre, it was a good thing, but sometimes it was a really, really bad thing because he would do dumb things or try to do wild stuff. And he says, you kind of see that in Caleb's game. That was a comp that I had not heard until we did this team, the hybrid of those two players that I actually really like.
Yeah, that's a good comp. And yeah, I see why people go to Mahomes when you watch him play, because like the off schedule stuff, and he does make some crazy throws. Maybe I still kind of like, should we be calling anyone Mahomes? Because he's like,
right, yeah,
he's Mahomes. But Caleb, I think as far as like any quarterback in the draft that has like a real chance to hit superstar level, just based on the traits, and he's going to be going to a good situation too with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. They've got a top 10 pick on offensive line from last year. Last year's all juice tackle, Darnell Wright. So it's a good situation. I'm excited for him. He's not going to as terrible a situation as last year's all juice team quarterback, Carolina. This team has kind of done the opposite, where one team traded up for the quarterback, the other team kind of had it fall into their laps, and now Caleb gets to go play on a talented team and hopefully, live out his best version of himself in the NFL, because I think that can be a pretty exciting player. Running back.
David, if you're into theater, how juicy would the theater be for the Chicago Bears to enact 30 years worth of revenge on the Green Bay Packers with the quarterback that is being compared to a hybrid between Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre?
You got to love those comparisons.
I mean, like, if that comes to fruition and you're able to sort of punch back for the first time since the late 80s with a guy that can do all the things that those guys up there were doing to you forever, it would just be unbelievable theater.
Well, it'd be unbelievable theater. It'd be tremendous. It's every Bears fan's fantasy. But I also think that in the here and now, it suggests that the way he's being described, he will immediately be better than Jordan Love. Or it could be. And think about that, because Jordan Love finished the year, last 8 weeks of the season, he was as good as any quarterback in the NFC. And if Caleb Williams is as good as he was just described by an outside impartial observer who talks to people who's plugged into the league, this is what we're talking about, people. This is why this was a no-brainer all along. This is what you're about to get. And yeah, a lot of ground to cover, but I think it tells you that there's no suspense. There's no suspense. It's just a matter of the Bears getting to draft night and handing in the card.
No question about it. Those were the voices of Charles Robinson and Charles McDonald that you heard in that clip there. And I believe I misspoke earlier. It was Therese Paylor that started the All Juice team. I made that little slip of.
That's okay. It's a hard name to say. Yeah. And he did a great job in creating that, and certainly left a legacy. It's just a tremendous thing to talk about every year. Dan, just to underscore what we're talking about, Caleb Williams, the consensus number one, as we've been referring to all along. Mike Lombardi, who's friend of the program, controversial guy, tweeted this out on Tuesday afternoon. Outside of Caleb Williams at number one, QB rankings are completely different from team to team. This is especially true for polarizing prospects like Drake May and J.J. McCarthy. Everything is on the table for round one. It's nice not to be worrying about what way things could go, although it affects the Bears at number 9, certainly not as high as the stakes are at number 1. So that just tells you a lot of things could happen, a lot of twists and turns, a lot of drama, but not with the Bears with the top pick.
Short little tease for something that I've got coming possibly this weekend in Chicago Tribune print edition, and we're still waiting to figure out our online launch date. But just a little bit of a look into what the Bears are getting in Caleb Williams and how Ryan Poles, the general manager who's been front and center in this vetting process, has processed the getting to know you part of this equation with Caleb Williams and the things that he hopes to put in place to elevate this young man to levels that quarterbacks in Bears history have never elevated to. We'll see which direction it goes.
Look forward to that. A couple little tidbits I want to ask you about real quick. Cody Whitehair signs a 1-year, $3 million contract with the Las Vegas Raiders. Luke Getsy's the offensive coordinator. Didn't he bench him in Chicago?
Well, Matt Eberflus benched him, but it was just kind of a combination of just trying to find the right group up front. Cody Whitehair still got a little game in him. He can give you that veteran experience, that life that you want up front, and he can be versatile. That's something that all teams are going to sign up for, right? Is that versatility to be able to make your life easier when you start to have injuries across the offensive line, which Cody showed numerous times throughout his career. He could step in anywhere needed in a pinch.
And since I seem to be a little bit preoccupied with what's going to be on the back of Caleb Williams on draft night, what's going to be on the back of his shoulder pads every Sunday, what number is he going to wear? Did I see something somewhere where Keenan Allen will now wear 15 with the Bears? Did I see that, Studs?
I have not seen that yet. I don't know what number it's going to be. Certainly you would like to know that by probably next Friday morning, because if you're the Bears and you are going to market the hell out of this thing, like you're supposed to market the hell out of this thing, you want those jerseys flying off of the shelf and flying out of the Bears online shop the minute that pick is announced.
Studs tells me that I'm glad I didn't retweet it. I'm glad I didn't see it, but there was a fake account making the rounds with bad info about jersey numbers. That's why I asked it as a rhetorical question, because how in the world could you make that change if you're Keenan Allen? You've worn 13 all your career. I hope that he keeps it, and I hope that Caleb Williams wears number 18.
Caleb Williams likes to buck trends. Caleb Williams may decline to wear a number at all and just put the S on his chest, right? And we'll just have the Superman S, and away we go.
What about Agent Zero? What about number 0?
Possibility, right? Let's see which direction all this goes. It's fascinating stuff here. And we'll keep you up to date with all the news and rumor that you can find in the
it's important stuff, Dan, because look, I'm talking to you in the context of I did watch the WNBA draft. I did see Caitlin Clark go to the Indiana Fever. I did see all of the reactions. She's handled herself well, by the way. And Chicago got 2 more stars with the Chicago Sky on draft night. But by the morning, in 1 hour, Fanatics has sold out of every Caitlin Clark jersey, every size. There's a big amount of money to be made here, so they got to make a decision quickly. They had to have discussed this.
Listen, and like what you're bringing up there, it goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about in terms of when you have these athletes that become more than just the athlete for the team they're playing for. Caitlin Clark is a perfect example of someone whose fame and experience went to unimaginable levels, the way that I anticipate Caleb Williams to go to unimaginable levels as well, in terms of the attention and the draw and the conversation and everything that on a regular basis. Caitlin Clark is a good little comparison right now for someone in the current day sports landscape that watched this explode, right? And you have to be ready for the explosion in a lot of different ways. And so that's what the Bears, the Fever, and Caitlin Clark and Caleb Williams are going to have to be ready for.
And the last thing I'll mention is that I referenced this morning on the radio, but it bears repeating. Here we are. I did watch the WNBA draft, and I saw the Chicago Sky draft Camila Cardoso from South Carolina, Angel Reese from LSU. That will define their franchise for the short-term future. Angel Reese is a star in women's college basketball. I went to a Blackhawks game on Sunday. I saw Frankie Nazer score his first goal on his first shot. The kid from Michigan, that is unbelievable as far as a scorer. He's going to pair with Connor Bedard and Korchinski, Kevin Korchinski, who's about 19 years old and looks younger. They have stars coming with the Blackhawks even before they draft. You've got the Bears about to take Caleb Williams, who will own this town if he's any good. He has an opportunity to own this town. And then they draft ninth. Maybe it's Roma Dunze. Let's say that for the sake of argument, it is. Oh my gosh, the Cubs have PCA and Michael Bush, and look at them. White Sox, okay, won't mention the White Sox. But my point is, there are a ton of young stars in Chicago sports that are changing the face of Chicago sports scene. And Caleb Williams is at the front of the pack, about to become one of the special people in town. And he's not alone, but I think he's going to stand apart.
Honestly, it's a fun time. It really is. And that's why it's worth taking that deep breath, taking that step back, and understanding that, look, like, this is a chance for the Bears to be relevant in ways that they haven't been relevant in a very long time. And like, if you're not excited by that, if you're looking for it to go off the rails and off the cliff, I feel sorry for you. I understand, because there's trauma from the past that leads you to think that way. But it really is, all things put on the side, a very optimistic and exciting time for the Chicago Bears and the city of Chicago for all the reasons you just mentioned.
Cannot wait to find out if he is going to be wearing Chanel or Prada. We'll find that information next time and get to the bottom of the most important stories here at Take the North podcast. Okay, we're going to wrap things up unless I missed anything. Did I miss anything?
I don't know. Did you have a question for me about the stadium at all, or is that too long of a discussion to wait till next week?
Let's get into that. Let's get into that next week, because I don't want to rush through it. People can prepare for that conversation by going to ChicagoTribune.com, doing a search for Dan's story with Colleen Kane and Bobby Coppin in the Sunday print edition. An exhaustive look at comparing Chicago to Minneapolis, Indianapolis, and Arlington. It's well worth your time, so we can have more time to discuss it next time, because I think that's a good reminder. And I got carried away with all of my.
We had much more significant things to get to, so I understand.
A lot of fashion statements there. So for Adam Sadzinski and Dan Wiederer, I'm David Haugh. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast. We'll talk to you next time.
Great talk. See you out there.